William Grant had been living a life that many would envy. A billionaire, successful beyond imagination, with luxury cars, sprawling estates, and endless opportunities. He spent his days attending meetings, making decisions that affected millions of people, and dining at the finest restaurants in the world. But as he sat in his usual corner booth at a restaurant on a Tuesday afternoon, he felt something was missing. The restaurant was an elegant place, with crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and polished marble floors that reflected the soft glow of the lights. It was the kind of place where the wealthy dined, the kind of place where people like William felt at home. He was seated near a window, a perfect view of the city's skyline stretching out before him. As he looked out at the view, his thoughts were clouded by the monotony of his life. He had everything, yet he felt empty inside. As he sat there, poking at his meal, William's eyes wandered across the room. That's when he noticed her. A young waitress, no older than 25, with a kind smile and a soft voice, was carefully helping a little girl. The girl, whose name William later learned was Lily, seemed to struggle with every movement. She had a disability that made even the simplest tasks a challenge. Her tiny hands trembled as she reached for the fork, but before she could even attempt to feed herself, the waitress gently took the fork from her hand and started feeding her instead. William wasn't one to usually notice people, especially those in service roles. But there was something different about this waitress. Her name was Emily, and as she leaned down to talk softly to Lily, William could see how patient and compassionate she was. Emily wasn't just doing her job, she was truly invested in making Lily comfortable. She smiled warmly as she fed the girl, encouraging her to take small bites and reassuring her when Lily seemed frustrated. For a moment, William felt like he was seeing the world through a different lens. Emily's actions, so simple yet so profound, caught his attention in a way that nothing had for a long time. He realized he had been living his life surrounded by wealth and luxury, but he had lost touch with what truly mattered. He had forgotten about kindness, empathy, and human connection. He watched as Emily gently wiped Lily's mouth, her touch tender as if the little girl were her own. The restaurant was full of people, but it was as if the two of them existed in a world of their own. It was a beautiful moment, one that William couldn't ignore. The contrast between Emily's warm, unselfish act and his own cold, detached existence hit him like a wave. He hadn't been aware of it before, but there was a heaviness in his chest. A weight that he couldn't shake off. Here was a woman, with so little, giving so much. And then there was him, someone with everything, but feeling like he had nothing to give. It was a humbling thought. William had grown accustomed to a life of isolation, where people only interacted with him because of his wealth. He had spent years surrounded by sycophants and yes-men, people who had never truly cared for him as a person. But Emily wasn't like that. She wasn't interested in his money or his status, she was simply doing what was right, out of the kindness of her heart. As Emily finished feeding Lily and began clearing the table, William couldn't help but watch her. He admired the way she moved, the way she interacted with Lily with such grace and patience. It wasn't just a job to her, it was a calling. William felt a strange desire to speak to her, to find out more about the person behind the kindness. But he didn't know how to approach her. What could he say? "I noticed how kind you were to that little girl," seemed like a line from a movie, not something he could say in real life. When Emily came to his table to refill his water glass, William seized the opportunity. His voice was softer than usual, almost unsure of himself. "Excuse me," he said, looking up at her. She smiled at him, her eyes bright and welcoming. "I just wanted to say, you were amazing with that little girl. I saw how patient you were with her. It was really inspiring." Emily paused, a slight blush creeping onto her cheeks. She wasn't used to receiving compliments like this, especially not from a customer. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate it, but her life had always been about doing the right thing, not seeking recognition. Still, there was something genuine in William's tone that made her smile. "Oh, thank you," Emily said, her voice soft. "She's a sweet girl. Her mom isn't able to come with her much, so I try to make sure she feels comfortable when she's here." William nodded, surprised by her humility. "It's rare to see someone so caring," he said, his words almost foreign to him. He had never thought much about the people who served him in his life, and yet, here he was, talking to a waitress as if she were someone of great importance. Most people wouldn't even notice. Emily shrugged slightly, looking down at the table as she busied herself with cleaning up the crumbs. "It's just what I do," she said. "I don't really think about it." William watched her for a moment longer, then stood up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, extracting a generous tip. But he didn't just leave it on the table. He folded the money neatly, wrote a note on the back of the bill, and handed it to her. "This is for you," he said. "For being kind. I think people like you deserve to be recognized." Emily's eyes widened as she looked down at the tip. It was more than she made in a whole shift. She didn't know what to say. "I thank you," she stammered, unable to hide her surprise. William smiled faintly, a small but genuine smile. "It's just a small token of appreciation," he said, then turned and walked out of the restaurant. As William stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, he couldn't help but feel a shift inside himself. Something had changed in him, though he wasn't quite sure what. He had always thought of himself as someone who didn't need anything or anyone. But Emily had made him realize that there was more to life than wealth and success. He had been living in a bubble, disconnected from the world around him, and it was time to change that. As he drove back to his mansion, the image of Emily's gentle touch, her patience with Lily, stayed with him. The world suddenly seemed a little brighter, a little more meaningful. And for the first time in years, William found himself wondering what it would be like to connect with others in a way that wasn't about business deals or money. Maybe, just maybe, this chance encounter had sparked something in him that would change his life forever. The next day, William couldn't stop thinking about Emily. He had returned to his routine, as usual, but his mind kept drifting back to the way she had helped Lily, the way she had given her full attention without any hesitation. It was a stark contrast to the cold, impersonal life William had been living for so long. He had built his wealth on hard work, but somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of the things that made life truly meaningful: compassion, kindness, and human connection. That afternoon, he found himself in the same restaurant again. This time, he wasn't sure what he was hoping to find. He had no particular plan, but he knew that he wanted to see Emily again. There was something about her that drew him in. As he walked through the door, he was met with the familiar elegance of the restaurant: polished floors, quiet murmurs of conversation, and the soft hum of the kitchen in the background. But today, the atmosphere felt different, somehow more alive. He was seated at the same booth by the window, but this time, instead of looking out at the city skyline, he found his gaze searching the room for Emily. He wasn't sure why he was feeling this way, but he couldn't deny the curiosity that tugged at him. He knew that he didn't normally go out of his way to speak to people, but something about her made him want to do more than just watch from afar. After a few minutes, Emily appeared, walking across the restaurant with a tray of drinks in hand. She seemed to glide across the floor, her movements graceful and effortless. William couldn't help but notice how she seemed to light up the room. She had a natural way about her, a kindness in her eyes that made the room feel warmer, even in the cool air of the restaurant. When she came over to refill his water glass, William finally found the courage to speak up. He had been thinking about it all morning, and now that the moment had arrived, his heart was beating faster than usual. Emily was standing before him, her bright smile lighting up her face as she did her job with the same quiet grace she always had. This time, though, William was ready to say something. "Hi," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. Emily looked up, surprised to see him addressing her directly. She smiled, recognizing him as the man from the previous day. "Hello," she replied, a friendly warmth in her voice. "I just wanted to say, again, that you were amazing with that little girl yesterday." "I don't think I've ever seen someone so patient and caring," William said, his words sincere. "It's rare to see someone go out of their way like that." Emily's smile grew a little shy as she shrugged, a slight blush creeping into her cheeks. She wasn't used to receiving compliments like this, especially not from a customer. She had always believed that her actions should speak for themselves, and that the satisfaction of knowing she had helped was enough. But William's words felt different, genuine and thoughtful. "It's just what I do," Emily said modestly, trying to brush off the praise. "Lily's a sweet girl, and she needs a little extra help sometimes. It's no big deal, really." But William wasn't buying it. He had seen something special in Emily, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. He paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I don't think you realize how much of a difference you're making," he said. "There are so many people out there who wouldn't even take the time to help someone like that. You're doing more than just your job." Emily hesitated, not sure how to respond. She wasn't used to talking about herself in such a way. She had always believed in helping without expecting anything in return. "I just try to do what's right," she said quietly. "It's not about recognition or anything like that. It's just kindness." William nodded, his mind racing. There was something about Emily's humility that struck a chord with him. It was refreshing to meet someone who didn't see everything in terms of what could be gained. So many people in his world were always looking for an advantage, but Emily seemed to give without expecting anything in return. It was rare, and it made him wonder why he had spent so much of his life focused solely on his own success. He reached into his pocket, taking out a few bills from his wallet. Emily hadn't noticed, but William had already decided that he wanted to do something for her, something that would show his appreciation. He wasn't used to giving in this way, but something about Emily had changed his perspective. As he folded the bills neatly and placed them on the table, he looked up at her. "This is for you," William said, his voice a little more serious now. "For being kind and thoughtful. You deserve to be recognized for it." Emily looked down at the money in surprise. It was an amount far beyond what she would normally expect, and her eyes widened as she looked back at him. I can't accept this," she stammered, her face flushing with embarrassment. She wasn't used to receiving such extravagant tips, especially from someone she had just met. "That's too much." William smiled gently. "It's not about the money. It's about acknowledging what you did. You made a difference in someone's life yesterday. And I think you deserve to be appreciated for that." Emily hesitated, unsure of what to do. She didn't want to seem ungrateful, but it felt strange to accept something so generous. She looked at him for a moment, trying to gauge his sincerity. There was no sign of arrogance or expectation in his eyes. He simply seemed to be offering a kind gesture, one that she hadn't experienced in a long time. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice soft. "I really appreciate it." William nodded, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. He wasn't sure why, but helping Emily made him feel lighter. He wasn't used to doing things for other people, especially people who didn't ask for anything in return. But this felt different. It felt like something he needed to do, like something had shifted inside him. As Emily walked away, he watched her for a moment, wondering if she knew just how much her kindness had affected him. He had been living in a world of opulence and excess for so long, but seeing her with Lily, seeing how she took the time to care for someone who needed it, made him realize that wealth wasn't the key to happiness. It was the simple acts of kindness, the human connections, that made life truly meaningful. As he sat back in his seat, William couldn't help but feel a growing curiosity about Emily. Who was she? What was her life like? And why did he suddenly feel the need to know more? He wasn't sure, but something told him that he had just met someone who could change his life forever. Over the next few weeks, William found himself visiting the restaurant more often than he ever had before. It wasn't just because he enjoyed the food or the atmosphere, it was because he wanted to see Emily again. After their brief conversation about Lily and her kindness, something had changed inside him. He couldn't quite put it into words, but there was a spark of curiosity about Emily that he couldn't ignore. Each time he walked into the restaurant, he looked for her. And each time, he found her working just as hard as she always did, with the same patience and kindness. At first, their exchanges were simple, polite greetings as she served him his meals. William would often watch her from across the room, noting how she interacted with the other customers, always smiling, always ready to help. He could see how much she genuinely cared for the people around her, how she took time to remember the little details of their lives. It was the kind of attentiveness that most people in his world had long since forgotten. Emily, on the other hand, hadn't expected anything to come of her interactions with William. She had grown up in a world where people like him were distant, aloof, and uninterested in the lives of ordinary people like her. But there was something about William that seemed different. He wasn't like the others. She didn't know if it was his way of speaking to her or the kindness he had shown when he gave her that unexpected tip, but Emily felt that he genuinely cared. One day, after William had finished his meal and was about to leave, he decided to stop and talk to her again. As he approached the counter, Emily was wiping down the surface, her mind lost in thought. She didn't see him coming, and when she looked up, she was surprised to see him standing there, looking at her with a gentle expression. "Hi," William said, his voice softer than usual. "I've been thinking about our last conversation. I just wanted to ask. How do you do it?" Emily frowned slightly, unsure what he meant. "Do what?" "Be so kind all the time. It's not something you see much in people these days," William explained. "Most people are too caught up in their own lives, in their own problems. But you make a difference in ways that most people can't even imagine." Emily felt a bit uncomfortable with the attention. She wasn't used to being praised for doing something she considered just part of her job. But there was something about the way William was asking that made her pause and think. She leaned against the counter and looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. "I don't really think about it that way," she said, her voice a bit quieter now. I just want to help people. I mean, there are so many people who have it harder than I do, so I try to make their day a little easier. I guess it's just the way I was raised." William nodded slowly, intrigued by her answer. "And what about you? Do you ever do anything just for yourself?" Emily hesitated, glancing down at the counter for a moment before looking back at him. She wasn't sure how to answer that question. She had spent so much of her life taking care of others, her family, Lily, that she hadn't really thought about her own needs. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I guess I don't really have time to think about myself. There's always something else to do." William watched her closely, his thoughts beginning to form. He could sense that Emily was someone who had sacrificed a lot for the people she cared about, but there was an underlying sadness in her words. She had given so much of herself to others that she had forgotten how to take care of her own needs. And that realization struck him deeply. "You know," William said slowly, "you deserve to have something just for yourself. You shouldn't have to put everyone else's needs before your own all the time." Emily blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected him to say that. "I appreciate that, but it's just how life is. I don't really have a choice." William's expression softened as he considered her words. He knew that Emily didn't expect anything from him, but he couldn't help feeling that he wanted to help her. He wasn't sure how, but he knew he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Something about her had touched him in a way that he couldn't ignore. She had a strength, a quiet resilience, that he admired. "Maybe you don't have to do everything alone," William said after a pause. "I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but there are ways you could get help. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders all the time." Emily was quiet for a moment, considering his words. She had been so focused on surviving day to day that she hadn't allowed herself to think about any other possibilities. Could there really be a way for her to take a step back, to focus on herself for a change? The thought felt almost foreign to her. "I don't know," Emily said, her voice uncertain. "It just feels like there's no time for that. Life doesn't stop just because I need a break." William smiled gently. "I understand. But you have to take care of yourself if you're going to be able to take care of anyone else. You're important too, you know." Emily didn't respond immediately. She wasn't sure how to process what William was saying. It was so different from the way she had always lived. But as she looked at him, she saw a sincerity in his eyes that made her pause. Maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe there was more to life than just getting through each day. William, sensing that Emily needed time to think, decided not to push any further. "Well," he said, standing up, "I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate everything you do. You're making a difference, even if you don't see it." Emily smiled faintly, touched by his words. "Thank you, William. That means more than you know." As William left the restaurant that day, he felt a strange sense of satisfaction. He hadn't solved any of Emily's problems, but something about their conversation had left him feeling like he was on the right path. He had made a connection with her, and it was clear to him that there was more to her than just being a waitress. She had dreams, hopes, and a life that went far beyond the walls of the restaurant. He wanted to help her realize those dreams, but he knew he couldn't rush it. It would take time. But for now, William was content knowing that he had at least made her stop and think. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was doing something that mattered. And for Emily, it was the beginning of a shift in how she saw herself. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to start thinking about her own needs. The days that followed William's conversation with Emily were filled with a quiet anticipation. Emily couldn't stop thinking about what he had said, how she needed to take care of herself if she wanted to continue taking care of others. It wasn't a new idea, but somehow, the way he had said it made her wonder if there was more to life than just surviving each day. Could she really afford to take a break? Could she find a way to focus on her own well-being without feeling guilty about it? It was a thought she hadn't allowed herself to entertain for a long time. As for William, he couldn't shake the feeling that something important had started between him and Emily. He knew that he had made an impact on her, but he also knew it wasn't enough to simply offer a few kind words. Emily needed more than just advice, she needed real help. He didn't know exactly how he could help, but he felt a growing sense of responsibility. It wasn't that he saw himself as a savior, but rather as someone who had the resources to make a difference. And if there was one thing he had learned from his life of privilege, it was that wealth could be used for more than just luxury. It could be used to change lives. One evening, as William was finishing up another long day of meetings, he found himself lost in thought. He had been thinking about Emily again. He knew she was struggling, and though he had no right to interfere in her life, he couldn't help but feel a desire to make her life easier. She had opened his eyes to something he had long since forgotten, the importance of kindness, of caring for others without expecting anything in return. Emily had something that many people, including him, lacked: true selflessness. It was a rare quality, and he couldn't ignore it. As he sat in his office, staring out the window at the city below, he knew that he had the means to help her, but he didn't want to come across as patronizing or intrusive. He needed to find a way to offer his support without overstepping his boundaries. But what could he do? He couldn't just offer her money, it wouldn't feel right. But he also knew that she didn't have the time or resources to invest in herself, to take that step back and focus on what she needed. It was then that an idea struck him. It was simple, but it felt right. He could offer Emily something she didn't have: time. Time to focus on herself, to take a break, to pursue her dreams without the constant worry of how to pay the bills or care for Lily. What if he could provide her with the means to live without the pressure of survival? He could do this without it feeling like charity, without making her feel indebted. He could give her the opportunity to truly take care of herself and her daughter. The next day, William made a phone call to his lawyer, asking him to make the necessary arrangements. He wasn't sure how Emily would respond, but he felt it was the right thing to do. He wanted her to have the space to think about her future, to follow her passions, and most importantly, to live a life where she didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders alone. Meanwhile, Emily was still struggling with her own thoughts. She had been thinking about what William had said, about taking care of herself. It wasn't easy for her to accept that she deserved something more than just getting by. Every time she thought about her future, she saw nothing but a long road ahead of her, filled with challenges. She loved her daughter, Lily, more than anything, but there were times when she felt as if her life had been put on hold. She couldn't remember the last time she had done something just for herself. It was on one of these quiet nights that William reached out to her again. He had asked Emily to meet him at the same restaurant where they had first spoken, and though she felt a little nervous, she agreed. She wasn't sure what to expect, but there was a part of her that felt a strange pull toward him. There was something comforting about the way he spoke to her, the way he listened without judgment. It was rare for her to feel understood, and she hadn't realized how much she needed that until now. When she arrived, William was already seated at their usual table. He stood up as she approached, offering her a warm smile. "I'm glad you could make it," he said, his voice gentle. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversations, and I wanted to talk to you about something." Emily sat down across from him, her curiosity piqued. "What's on your mind?" William took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. "I know that life hasn't been easy for you," he began, his tone sincere. "And I've been thinking about how I can help. I know you don't have the time or resources to focus on your own dreams, and I think that's unfair. You deserve a chance to live without the constant worry of how you're going to make ends meet." Emily blinked in surprise, unsure of where this conversation was going. "William, I don't know what you mean. I appreciate your concern, but I don't need charity." William raised a hand, gently interrupting her. "This isn't charity, Emily. This is about giving you a chance to take a break. To focus on yourself, your goals, without having to worry about how to pay for everything. You deserve that." Emily was quiet for a moment, taking in his words. She hadn't expected this. She had never considered that someone like William would want to help her in such a way. But there was something in his voice, something that told her he was sincere. "I don't know," Emily said slowly. "I've never been the kind of person who accepts help easily. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," William said gently. "You're a person who deserves to have a life, just like everyone else. You've worked so hard for so long, and I want to give you the space to focus on what makes you happy. If you ever want to pursue something outside of your current life, I want to help make that happen." Emily's mind was racing. Could she really accept this? Could she allow herself to take a step back, to focus on her own dreams without feeling guilty? For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope, the possibility of a future where she wasn't just surviving, but living. "You don't have to make a decision now," William said, sensing her hesitation. "Just know that I'm here to support you. Whenever you're ready, I'll be there." Emily looked at him, her heart full of gratitude. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: her life was about to change in ways she had never imagined. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself to dream. The weeks following their conversation were a whirlwind for Emily. She had never expected William's offer to come with so many possibilities. The weight of the decision she now faced was overwhelming, and yet, for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to consider something beyond just surviving. She thought about what it might feel like to live a life where she wasn't constantly worried about bills, about taking care of Lily, about the never-ending cycle of work. For the first time, she dared to dream about her future. Emily wasn't someone who had ever been comfortable accepting help, especially not from someone like William. She had always prided herself on being independent, on doing things on her own, no matter how hard it was. But there was something in William's offer that made her stop and think. He wasn't asking her for anything in return. He wasn't trying to change her life in a way that felt uncomfortable or overwhelming. He was simply giving her the opportunity to take a step back and breathe, to focus on herself for a change. It took Emily several days to process everything. She thought about her daughter, Lily, and the life she had always wanted to give her. She thought about her dreams, ones she had buried deep down because there had never been time to pursue them. But now, with William's offer hanging in the air, she realized she had a choice. She could either continue down the path of constant struggle, or she could take a chance and allow herself the opportunity to change her life, to find something for herself that wasn't just about taking care of others. One afternoon, Emily sat at her kitchen table, a notebook in front of her. She had been jotting down ideas for her future, dreams she hadn't dared to write down in years. She thought about going back to school, about studying to become a therapist for children with disabilities. It was something she had always been passionate about, but it had always seemed impossible. Now, with William's offer, it felt within reach. She could finally focus on her education, learn the skills that would allow her to help children like Lily in a more meaningful way. The idea brought a sense of peace that Emily hadn't known in a long time. But there was still doubt in her heart. Could she really make such a drastic change? Was she ready to take this step? Emily's life had been shaped by sacrifice, and the thought of putting herself first felt strange. But when she thought about Lily, when she imagined a future where she could truly provide for her daughter and give her a better life, Emily knew it was worth it. She knew she had to take this chance. That evening, after putting Lily to bed, Emily picked up her phone and dialed William's number. It had been a few weeks since their last conversation, and she felt nervous about making the call. What if she made the wrong decision? What if this was all just a dream that would lead to disappointment? William answered on the first ring, his voice warm and reassuring. "Emily," he said. "I've been thinking about you. How are you doing?" "I'm doing okay," Emily replied, her voice shaking a little. She wasn't sure how to begin. "I've been thinking about your offer. A lot." William was silent for a moment, sensing her hesitation. "You don't have to decide anything right away. I just want you to know that whenever you're ready, I'll be here to support you." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision. "I think I'm ready," she said softly. "I want to take that step. I want to go back to school, focus on my future, and do something for myself, for Lily." The words felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders. For so long, she had put her own needs aside, thinking there would never be a time for her to focus on herself. But now, with William's support, she realized that it wasn't just about her, it was about giving herself the tools to build a better future for both her and Lily. "I'm so proud of you, Emily," William said, his voice full of genuine warmth. "This is a big step, and I know it's not easy. But I believe in you. I'll help you however I can." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, William. I don't know how to say it, but, this means more than I can put into words. I know you'll do great things, Emily, he said. And I'll be here, cheering you on every step of the way. As they ended the call, Emily sat back in her chair, a sense of calm settling over her. For the first time in years, she felt like she was on the verge of something new, something exciting. She had always been the one to care for others, to put everyone else's needs before her own. But now, she was taking the first step toward building a future for herself, a future where she could be the best version of herself for Lily, without sacrificing her own dreams. The following weeks were filled with preparations. Emily applied to several programs that would allow her to pursue a career in therapy. She started taking classes online, carving out time after work to study and learn new skills. It wasn't easy, but she was determined. Every evening, after putting Lily to bed, she would sit at her kitchen table, working through assignments, studying for exams, and slowly but surely, making progress toward her goals. There were days when she felt overwhelmed, when the weight of everything seemed too much to bear. But every time she thought about giving up, she remembered why she was doing this. She was doing it for Lily. She was doing it for herself. Meanwhile, William continued to support her in ways that went beyond just financial help. He checked in with her regularly, offering words of encouragement and advice whenever she needed it. He had never expected to become so invested in someone else's life, but Emily's strength, determination, and kindness had left a lasting impression on him. He admired her more than he could express, and he was proud of the progress she was making. As the months went by, Emily's confidence grew. She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving. She had found a purpose beyond just getting through the day, and it felt incredible. She knew there was still a long road ahead of her, but she wasn't afraid anymore. With William's support and her own determination, she was ready to face whatever came next. One day, as Emily sat at her desk working on a project, Lily walked into the room, holding a drawing in her hand. She smiled brightly as she handed it to her mother. "Look, Mommy. I made this for you." Emily's heart melted as she looked at the drawing. It was a simple picture, a stick figure of her holding hands with Lily, both smiling. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." Lily hugged her mother tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Mommy. You're going to be the best helper ever." Emily kissed her daughter on the forehead, tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't need anything more. This was enough. She was on the right path, and with each step, she was creating a future where she could be everything Lily needed, and everything she had always dreamed of being.